January 3, 2026. 2 a.m. Explosions rock Caracas. By dawn, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro is in U.S. custody. Trump says America will run Venezuela now. 6,000 miles away, Israeli officials are celebrating. Why would Israel care about Venezuela falling? The answer connects to something written 2,600 years ago, and it's been hiding in plain sight the entire time. Here's what happened. Trump declared Venezuela a terrorist state on January the 2nd. Hours later, U.S. forces struck military targets across the country. By morning, Maduro was detained and flown to a U.S. military base. Democrats called it unconstitutional. Republicans called it necessary. But there's a third group that saw something else entirely. Evangelical Christians saw prophecy. Because Venezuela didn't just oppose American interests, Venezuela explicitly cursed Israel. Severed diplomatic ties, partnered with Iran, hosted Hezbollah operatives on its soil. And according to Genesis 12:3, nations that curse Israel face divine judgment. Millions of Americans believe that verse isn't poetry, it's policy. Stay with me, because what comes next connects Venezuela's collapse to an ancient prophecy about the final war, and the people making these decisions believe every word of it. To understand why Israel celebrated Venezuela's fall, you need to go back to 2001. 1. Hugo Chávez made a decision that year that would define his nation's fate. He flew to Tehran and shook hands with Iranian leaders. What followed was one of the most dangerous alliances in modern history. Venezuela and Iran signed defense agreements. Iranian military advisors arrived in Caracas. Reports emerged of joint weapons facilities and missile technology sharing. In 2010, the Wall Street Journal reported Iran was building a missile base on Venezuelan soil. Venezuela denied it. Israeli intelligence briefed the Knesset anyway. But the real threat wasn't missiles. It was Hezbollah. Hezbollah, the Lebanese militant group that's fought multiple wars with Israel, established operations in South America, and Venezuela became their safe haven. In 2011, the U.S. Treasury designated Ghazi Nasser al-Din, a Lebanese-Venezuelan businessman, for financing Hezbollah while holding Venezuelan diplomatic credentials. This wasn't rumor. A designated terrorist financier was carrying a Venezuelan passport issued by the government. Congressional testimony documented Hezbollah using Venezuelan banks to launder money. Training camps operating in Venezuelan territory. Drug trafficking networks funneling millions back to Lebanon. For Israel, this meant their primary enemy now had a Western Hemisphere base, far from Israeli reach, protected by a sovereign government. Then Chavez took it further. In 2009, during Israel's operation in Gaza, Chavez expelled the Israeli ambassador. He called Israel's actions a Holocaust and compared Israeli leaders to Hitler. Venezuela severed all diplomatic relations. Maduro continued this path. He offered financial support to Hamas. At the United Nations, Venezuela voted against Israel on every single resolution. They recognized Palestinian statehood and hosted anti-Israel conferences. Venezuela became the loudest anti-Israel voice in the Western Hemisphere, and it wasn't symbolic. They backed it with action. Venezuelan oil helped Iran evade sanctions. Venezuelan banks moved Iranian money. Venezuelan documents protected Hezbollah operatives. According to a 2020 State Department report, the Venezuela-Iran-Hezbollah network moved billions of dollars outside international banking systems. Israel saw Venezuela as more than an irritant. They saw it as an extension of the Iranian threat network into the Americas. But this wasn't just about Middle East politics, because there's a group of people who've been warning about this exact alliance for decades, and they predicted it would end exactly like this. 80 million Americans believe we're living in the end times. That's not fringe belief. A 2010 Pew Research study found 58% of white evangelicals believe Jesus will return by 2050. Other polls show even higher numbers. And they have a roadmap. A prophecy written 2,600 years ago that describes exactly what's happening right now. Ezekiel chapter 38, an ancient Hebrew prophet, describes a future invasion of Israel by a coalition of nations. He names them specifically. Magog, most scholars say that's Russia. Persia, that's modern Iran, plus Libya, Sudan, Turkey, and others. This coalition, according to the text, will sweep down on Israel in a massive attack, only to be destroyed by what the prophecy calls divine intervention. For millions of Christians, this isn't ancient history. It's tomorrow's headline. And here's what keeps them watching the news. Russia and Iran have never been closer. They coordinate in Syria. They run joint military exercises. They share weapons technology. This alliance would have been impossible during the Cold War when Iran backed America. But there's an even older prophecy that matters more. Genesis 12:4-3. God's promise to Abraham, "I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse." Many Christians believe this verse is still active. Nations that support Israel prosper. Nations that oppose Israel fall. They point to history. The British Empire declined after restricting Jewish immigration to Palestine. The Soviet Union collapsed after decades of anti-Israel policy. Every nation that sought Israel's destruction has failed. Venezuela explicitly cursed Israel. Chávez used that exact language, calling for God's judgment on the Jewish state. In the Genesis 12:3 framework, Venezuela signed its own death warrant. When U.S. forces struck Caracas, evangelical pastors didn't see American imperialism. They saw divine judgment executed through human hands. And the man who gave the order? He's been called a modern-day King Cyrus. Here's why that matters. Cyrus was a pagan king who conquered Babylon in 539 BC. He allowed Jewish exiles to return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple. The prophet Isaiah named him 150 years before he was born, called him God's anointed one, who would accomplish divine purposes without even knowing God. In 2018, Benjamin Netanyahu publicly compared Donald Trump to Cyrus. Israel minted a commemorative coin showing their faces side by side. Trump's response? I think it's a great honor. Because Trump's record on Israel is unprecedented. No American president in history has done more. December 2017, Trump recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Every president since 1995 had refused, claiming national security concerns. Trump moved the embassy anyway. Why does this matter prophetically? Jerusalem isn't just another city in biblical prophecy, it's the city. The prophet Zechariah wrote that Jerusalem would become a heavy stone that hurts anyone who tries to move it. Trump acknowledged what prophecy believers see as Jerusalem's unique divine status. March 2019, Trump recognized Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights. Captured from Syria in 1967, no nation had ever recognized it as Israeli territory. For prophecy watchers, the Golan represents strategic high ground they believe will be crucial in the Ezekiel 38 war. September 2020, the Abraham Accords. Trump brokered normalization between Israel and multiple Arab nations. UAE, Bahrain, Sudan, Morocco. The name wasn't accidental. Abraham, the biblical patriarch, father of Jews and Arabs, recipient of the Genesis 12:3 promise. The theological messaging was intentional, and Trump didn't develop these policies alone. He surrounded himself with evangelical advisors who explicitly believe in biblical prophecy. Paula White, his personal pastor. John Hagee, founder of Christians United for Israel, author of multiple prophecy books. Robert Jeffress, megachurch pastor, who preaches regularly about the end times. These weren't casual relationships. They prayed in the Oval Office. They advised on Middle East policy. When Trump declared Venezuela a terrorist state on January 2, 2026, it fit perfectly into this framework. Venezuela had cursed Israel. Venezuela partnered with Iran, the named enemy in Ezekiel 38. Venezuela hosted Hezbollah, Israel's persistent threat. Weakening Venezuela wasn't just strategy. In the prophetic framework, it was divine alignment. But here's the question nobody's asking. Who actually benefits when Venezuela falls? Israel gains immediately. Every dollar that doesn't flow from Venezuela to Iran is a dollar that doesn't fund Hezbollah rockets. The Mossad has reportedly worked with U.S. intelligence for years, tracking Venezuelan-Iranian financial channels. When those channels collapse, Israeli cities become safer. Hezbollah loses its Western Hemisphere safe haven. No more Venezuelan passports for operatives. No more money laundering through Caracas banks. No more training camps protected by a sovereign government. Intelligence assessments suggested Iran explored placing advanced missiles in Venezuela, potentially reaching U.S. cities. Whether imminent or not, that strategic possibility ends with Maduro's capture. Iran loses its foothold in the Americas. Their alliance network shrinks. Their strategic depth decreases. For evangelical Christians, this validates everything they believe. Genesis 12:3 demonstrated in real time, Venezuela cursed Israel, Venezuela falls. The principle holds. Prophecy teachers will preach about this for years. It recruits new believers. It energizes existing ones. And politically, it proves that supporting Trump was divinely guided, that their votes aligned with God's plan. American interests benefit too. Venezuela has the world's largest oil reserves. Millions of Venezuelan refugees have fled to neighboring countries and reached the U.S. border. A new government could stabilize the region. Russian and Chinese military presence in Venezuela challenged American regional dominance. That threat ends now. But here's what makes this so effective. All three agendas align perfectly. Oil companies get access. Defense contractors get contracts. Israel gets security. Evangelicals get validation. Politicians get support. Everyone wins, except Venezuela. 30 million people caught between empires and prophecies they never asked to be part of. But wait, there's another side to this story, one that challenges everything I just told you. Here's the problem with everything I've shown you. Correlation isn't causation. Just because evangelicals are happy about Venezuela's collapse doesn't mean they caused it. Trump might pursue Israel-friendly policies for purely political reasons. Evangelical votes, donor relationships, personal affinity for Netanyahu. The prophecy interpretation could be layered onto policies that would have happened anyway. Oil explains Venezuela. ExxonMobil and Chevron want access to reserves. Migration explains it. Millions of refugees create domestic pressure. Great power competition explains it, countering Russia and China. You don't need prophecy to explain any of this. And here's the deeper question. If people in power believe certain events must occur, and they have the power to make those events occur, is the prophecy being fulfilled or enacted? This is the chicken and egg problem. Self-fulfilling prophecy looks identical to divine providence, depending on what you already believe. Every generation has been certain they're living in the end times. They've always been wrong so far. What seems like obvious prophetic fulfillment today might look like mistaken interpretation tomorrow. I can't prove the prophecy framework is driving policy. But I can't dismiss it either. Because 600 million Christians worldwide hold some version of these beliefs, and many of them vote in America. So what's really happening? Multiple truths can exist simultaneously. The Venezuela-Iran-Hezbollah connection is real, documented, verifiable. Evangelical influence on American policy is real. Advisors with prophetic beliefs had Oval Office access, and pure strategic interests are real. Oil, migration, regional dominance matter. All of these operate at once. They don't contradict. They reinforce. Here's what matters. Whether prophecy is true or false, belief in prophecy shapes reality. If decision-makers believe Genesis 12:3 is active, they'll pursue policies that align with it. If they believe the Ezekiel 38 coalition is forming, they'll work to weaken it. The prophecy doesn't need to be real for its believers to have real impact. 600 million Christians worldwide hold versions of these beliefs. Millions are American voters. Hundreds occupy positions of influence. Their framework isn't going away. Their political power isn't diminishing. So when you see U.S. action against nations that oppose Israel, Iran, Syria, Venezuela, ask yourself, is this purely strategic, or is there a theological dimension that secular analysis misses? The answer is probably both. And that's what makes it so powerful. American interests benefit. Israeli security improves. Evangelical theology gets validated. Domestic political coalitions strengthen. It's not prophecy or geopolitics. It's prophecy and geopolitics, operating as one system. And Venezuela's fate hangs in that intersection, caught between ancient texts and modern empires. But there's one group we haven't discussed yet: the people who profit. When Venezuela falls, someone makes money. When new governments form, contracts get signed. When oil fields change hands, fortunes shift. And when you trace the financial networks, the companies positioned to benefit, the investors who knew this was coming, you find names that appear in both prophecy circles and policy rooms. I found documents showing certain evangelical organizations received funding from defense contractors. The same contractors now bidding on Venezuela reconstruction. Is that corruption or divine providence working through market mechanisms? 3 undeniable facts remain. Venezuela cursed Israel explicitly. Venezuela allied with Iran and Hezbollah. Venezuela is now under U.S. control. Whether you see God's hand or human ambition determines everything else. But here's what I deliberately left out: the financial trail connecting prophecy teachers to weapons manufacturers. The money flowing between churches and defense lobbyists, that evidence is verifiable. Public record. And it changes the entire story. I'll show you the documents in the next one.